today with Technical Writer HQ. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm Jessica. I'm a senior technical writer at the MathWorks. I've been here about 3 years now, and I primarily write for a product called Fixed Point Designer for MATLAB and Simulink, and I also write about deep learning compression.
And can you talk a little bit more about what the project you're writing for does and the company overall, just so people have some more context?
Yeah, so MATLAB and Simulink are software platforms that try to make the process of writing code and analyzing data very simple for scientists and engineers who maybe aren't professional software engineers but need to use those kinds of tools in their line of work. So the product I work on, obviously deep learning is everywhere nowadays. It's showing up in your smartphone, it's showing up in your cars. And we're working on tools to compress the size of these models so they can fit on very small chips that go on these various devices. And Fixed Point Designer is a similar product used to play around with different data types to kind of shrink the size of your program to fit on, say, an FPGA you might put on a spacecraft or something of this nature.
Very cool. It seems like you're working in a great industry that's it's not going away anytime soon. It's only getting bigger and bigger, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
So curious of how you got into technical writing. Was this something that was on your mind early on or something that you sort of fell into? Would love to hear the story behind it.
I honestly sort of fell into it. So I came from a physics background. I studied physics in my undergraduate, and I went on to do a master's and a PhD in it as well. Kind of thinking all along that I'd be a research scientist or something. And by the end of my PhD, I realized the academic life wasn't for me. So I kind of cast a very wide net, say, what is my skill set? What else can I do with what I've learned? And I ended up spending about a year or so doing quality assurance kind of work for a medical device company. So I was working with hardware, assessing, image quality for different cameras and things like that. And then I actually ended up having to move from Southern California to New England for personal reasons. So I, quit my job, packed up, left, and then once again went on the job hunt, being like, I'm starting from a fairly blank slate. What do I want to do? So I was looking all over the place, honestly, and I sort of fell into technical writing from a colleague of mine who I went to grad school with, being like, hey, you use MATLAB all the time. Have you ever thought of working for MATLAB? And so this had never crossed my mind, but I pulled up their website, looked at the job listings, and saw technical writing there. Didn't know anything about it, hadn't considered it for a career. But the more I looked into it, it really seemed like something that would be interesting. So I went for it, and here I am.
That's very cool. Yeah, I don't think there's enough education around it. And it sounds like you have a great background for it. It just wasn't something that was known until you sort of came across it.
Yeah, exactly.
And which seems like many of the people who are, watching this video, they probably have just learned about technical writing saying, hey, I didn't know this was an option for me. This is something that I can do. And my background seems to align and jump into this industry. Now, I would love to hear about some of the things that you feel like make you successful on the job. And maybe that comes from some of the experiences you've had before technical writing as well. So the ecosystem of, what makes you a great technical writer?
Oh my goodness, it's a broad question, but curiosity. I'm a kind of person that gets bored easily. I don't, want to work on one project forever. So technical writing is fun because I can pick up a project, learn everything about it, write about it, and then move on to the next project, the next project, the next project. There's always something new to learn, and that's been a great experience for me, of just being able to dabble around in different areas. In my schooling, it wasn't focused on technical writing necessarily, but I ended up doing a lot of work in that area. So we published papers as part of my research projects for my PhD. And then just, internally, we would generate documents we developed this experimental procedure, how do I communicate that to the next generation of students who come along? So while there wasn't explicit schooling, explicit training for technical writing, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of pick up the skill set working in other areas as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And, one of the questions I also have for you is that there's a lot of different technical writing routes you can take. And it seems like you're working for more of a technical product than you can call yourself a technical writer and also work on not that technical products, right? But
Right.
sounds like it's on the much more technical side. So what does it take to be able to, one is adjust to that and do that successfully? Because you're communicating with lots of different subject matter experts, as well as like trying to understand it as good as possible, maybe to their level to an extent, so you can succeed on the job.
Right. So maybe you have better insight to this, but they actually call us engineering technical writers. So we don't just write, we're actually involved in the full product life cycle, all the way from, developing requirements for a new product, designing a new product, kind of the whole end-to-end picture. So you can be very involved at a very technical level. And for me, I came from the more technical background. So that's the part that actually comes more naturally, and it was the more writing and communication and like learning how to follow a style guide and things of that nature that I had to sort of pick up on the go. But of course, technology, especially in the software world, changes so quickly. So you're constantly having to learn new things. And for me, it's a lot of identifying who are the subject matter experts that you can really go to and learn from. So obviously, I can't be the expert in every single thing that I write for, but I work with many, many people who are. And knowing who to go to really helps me be successful in my job.
And would love to hear more about that, because I think many people who start a job that's as an engineering technical writer, there's a lot expected of you, and you have to find those people. You're like, who am I communicating with? Who should I, build relationships with? What does it look like to go about that process to ensure that you take the best step first within a company that you just started working at?
In my case, the company was actually very supportive of this. So you have your manager, of course, you can always go to, but they also assign you a buddy. Someone who's been around, is maybe adjacent to your area, has kind of been here a while. And between those people, those are your kind of first forays into, okay, I have this question, who, in this realm of people can I talk to? And of course, it's something you have to learn over time. I mean, companies are very, very large. It takes time to get to know everybody. But there's different people that you can go to for different levels of questions. So in our case, there's software developers who maybe created the product, wrote the code for it. But then what's also useful for writing sometimes are things like user experience specialists. So they're not writers necessarily, but they have one-on-one interactions with customers and kind of are aware of common stumbling points in the product that maybe you want to consider in your documentation. So having these different connections in different areas of specialties kind of give you different insights into what might make useful documentation.
That makes sense. And I think ultimately, like those relationships, you're going to understand, like, okay, this person is the person I go to for X, this is the person I go to for Y. And when you step into such a role, what are some of the expectations that people have of you at the beginning? And what are some of maybe like unreasonable expectations that if a lot of people who are watching this video may be looking at jobs and applying and saying, and companies are like, hey, we expect you to do this. And they're like, hey, that's a bit unreasonable, right? So the reasonable and unreasonable ones.
Reasonable and unreasonable. I mean, fully reasonable, like the willingness to learn. Like any new job you take, there's a learning on-ramp. No one's perfect to begin with. It takes you time to learn the skill set, learn that particular job, learn your teammates. And that's just going to take time. As far as unreasonable, like in my case, you're jumping into a new area. Like obviously my background was physics. It was not software development, fixed point math, like these kinds of things. So there's kind of the expectation that, okay, you're going to take some time to learn these skills, right? It's a new skill set. So you can't be expected on day one to be an expert on this necessarily, unless you have the background and you're hired for that position. But if you're not, you're going to take some time to develop these skills.
Yeah, nothing comes right off the bat. It is a process, and I think it's reasonable for like other people to understand that as well, and also be there to help guide you. Now we have someone who asked a question, which she said, Nubia. She said, when it comes to selecting opportunities, what is the criteria that you look at? So like in terms of selecting a company to work at, do you have a certain criteria that you're filtering through? You said that you sort of stumbled across it, but maybe you already had some criteria in mind through that process.
For me, it's a mix of wanting to enjoy my work. So, I want to come to work excited every day, kind of always having something new to learn, interesting projects to work on. But for me, there's also a very important aspect of kind of work-life balance. I'm sure that comes up a lot for everybody. Wanting to be able to log off at the end of the day and spend time with my family. And there was also the aspect of I'm sorry, I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, I think if you have work-life balance, you really have it, that's what it is. And trying to find that is hard. I think, sometimes you don't know because you can't really meet all the team members on a very
Sure.
deep level before you start working at the company. And there's only so much, you can meet with them and maybe for like a half hour, but how much do you get out of a half hour? It's hard.
That's where the interview process is hard. This
Yeah.
company also, it very much emphasized core values, which sometimes you can more glean from company websites and things of that nature. But really wanting to put out, quality product and being like, we're going to give you the right answer. We're not going to rush something just to get it out the door, but we want to do it right. We want to do right by our customers. We want to do right by our employees. We want to do right by, society in general. So that's very, very nice to see, and not just, what makes the stock market go up, right?
Mhm.
So actually having those core values that you can always look back to definitely help.
Yeah, I think also just understanding how they look at technical writers' performance and judge their performance sometimes gives you a good idea. Some questions are, I think, also hard to ask during the interview process, and you're always like, if I ask this question, is it going to like, are they going to not like me? But I need to know. And I was talking to a couple of people recently that are like, I wanted to talk to other people on the team, but I just felt like I was taking up too much of their time, but I really want to know. And I'm like, that is, the trade-off of the process. It is what it is sometimes. And just so some of the viewers understand, what went into your preparation to work as a technical writer when it came to, hey, I'm going to prepare for the interviews. I'm going to ensure that my background and my story aligns for when they ask me, hey, why do I want to work here?
So for me, it was partly the self-education of what is the role of a technical writer. So that was kind of new to me. So exploring various resources online, and talking to people, acquaintances, of just what do you do day to day? What is the job? Um, that was sort of new to me with my particular background. Um, and then preparing for the interview and resume writing and that kind of thing, it's very much um, looking at my history and pulling out what relevant skills do I have that apply to this career. Because on the surface, perhaps my degree doesn't exactly align, but I can go and say, hey, I wrote this paper, it was published in this journal, or hey, I worked with this very cross-specialty team between physics and chemistry, and we had colleagues overseas, and these type of very cross-discipline collaborative kind of projects really translate well to a wide variety of jobs. And I took advantage of there's a lot of services, career development kind of services that help you kind of analyze your background and pull out these different skill sets and be able to put them in kind of a more resume kind of format, right? That are really more tailored to a job like technical writing.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that would help a lot. One of the things that I come across that people struggle to tailor their resume to a particular job to, they keep it broad enough to where they can sort of mass apply, but then they don't hear back from anybody.
Right.
And it's sort of this balance between how much effort do you want to put in for every job you apply to. And it's hard. I think it's very patient process. From everybody that I've seen has really succeeded though in getting a job they wanted, they always tailor their resume and cover letter, and they always get the job they want. On the other side, like we just talked about, the interview process, you still don't get all the information out of it. So they'll get a job at like quote unquote their dream company, from what looks like on their LinkedIn profile and website, and then they don't like the company. So
It's
it
hard
is,
to tell.
yeah, it's a battlefield out there for sure. One of the things I'd love to talk with you about is the future of technical writing. I know it's a bit of a broad subject. So when we think about the future of technical writing, some of the things that are being brought up is that you have AI tools coming out that are replacing a lot of copywriting and blog writing, and those writers are moving over towards technical writing and saying, "Hey, I need to find safety in my job. Where can I go? I love writing, and I still want to, keep doing this in some way." And then we're also seeing like new tools come out. Right before this call, we were talking about a feature that Google Docs added, which is a verification feature. So if you want to work with a subject matter expert, you can just tag them on it and say, "Hey, verify this piece of content within my larger document." Now, feel free to talk about where the future is going for your specific industry, any area that you've been thinking of. You go, "Hey, I wonder what this is going to look like."
Yeah, so I'm not an expert here. I can only speak from what I've seen. But for us, we have kind of interesting internal projects going on to, you write something, but you always need a technical expert to verify that what you've written is true and accurate and all this other stuff. So we're working on various tools to make that process easier internally. And in terms of externally, what I'm kind of excited about and a little involved in is embedding videos directly in documentation. So far we've been very, very heavily text-based documentation, but being able to have a page that has, say, a full text example and then like a 5-minute walkthrough video that shows the same content. And then we're also looking into various accessibility tools. So automatic subtitling of videos, putting little hover over text on our images, just to try to make it more accessible for various different kinds of users. So I find that pretty exciting. I'm not an expert in the automated AI generated documentation, but from where I'm looking at, I think there's always room for kind of a human in the space. There's a lot to translate from a very technical field to something that a non-expert user can understand. And at least where I am, I don't see AI quite handling that yet. Perhaps the copyright sort of info, but the in-depth documentation is still very much human-centric work.
100%. I don't think technical writers are going to get replaced anytime soon. I think if anything, the industry is going to grow significantly as there's more technology and more complexity that needs to be simplified, for sure. And yeah, when we see all the different technology come out and we see all these copywriters and blog writers and, I follow some of these tools and some of these companies and see what they're doing. And at some point, these writers are like, "Oh, we really love this tool." And then they sort of wake up like 6 months later when the company starts offering the same services that their own users were using, right? A lot of companies end up doing that. It's not out of the norm, but then it sort of, oh, this company is basically like created this tool, and now I was an original user, but they're making more money now offering my services to companies at a lower price and doing it through AI. And that's become a very big thing. So I think we're going to see this big push for people jumping into technical writing. And yeah, I'm curious and it's just happened. Like this year was really big on it. So I think over the next couple of years, we'll really see the effect of it and know what's coming. Now, curious, one is how big is your technical writing team? And then two is if you're looking to add somebody to your technical writing team, because many of the people who are watching this video are looking to get their first role as a technical writer, what are some of the qualities you'd look for?
So the team I'm on it fluctuates, but roughly 10 to 20 writers. And we work on a subset of the products produced by the company. What was your second question? I'm sorry.
If you're looking to add a technical writer to your team, what are some of the qualities you would look for in a person if you were to hire them?
So, the standard resume stuff. So we take a look at your education. We take a look at if you have any work experience. But from where I've sat on interview panels, what I find really interesting is we ask interviewees to give a presentation, not too particular about the exact content, just a project they've worked on in the past. And for me personally, I'm not a hiring manager, but as someone who might be looking at this person as a future coworker, just how they communicate a project they've worked on, like even in a speech format, can sometimes give a really good insight to how they might communicate as a writer. Are you clear? Do you have good style in your presentation? Even simple things like spelling and punctuation in PowerPoint slides can be interesting. But also the ability to answer questions and take and receive feedback. So as a writer, we're constantly having back and forth interactions with developers and different stakeholders when we're working on a project, and just being able to receive feedback and take that in and then kind of act on it is very important for our role.
That's such a good point that, wanted to make several good points. One of the ones I really want to highlight is that it's technical communication at the end of the day. And that also means speaking and presenting. I think many people who jump into technical writing forget about that part. You have to communicate with people to get information. And in order to do that, your communication often, like just speaking, really does reflect like your writing skills. And if you can speak well, your writing skills are probably, pretty good. I would imagine chances are. So we have another question come in, which was said by Nubia again. Are there any tools that would, can you recommend any tools to make a candidate who may want to break into engineering technical writing more attractive? She says she has a Scrum certification and would like to break in. So any tools that they can add to their resume, whether that be, I guess, certification, training, or maybe just tools to streamline their work?
We don't emphasize that super heavily. We do work with, things like XML editors. In my case, I use LaTeX a lot in grad school, and there's some sort of similarity there. They're not exactly the same. I guess it depends what kind of company you're looking at. So in my case, I work at a software company. So depending on what team you're writing for, they may desire some amount of experience in C++, for example. It kind of depends on where exactly you're wanting to apply. In our case, I don't know that Scrum certification is super important, but just more generically, having work experience and being able to work on a cross-functional team and meet deadlines and set priorities and things like that really helps out.
Yeah, I do think there's the difference of understanding the concept. There's like, hey, I understand what Agile and Scrum are, but have you worked in that environment and met deadlines? Is like a whole different thing. Very easy to understand concepts, but meeting deadlines is night and day. And
in our case, like priority setting, because there's always more work than can be done. So being able to say, this is absolutely necessary for product to ship versus this is nice to have, right? And that it takes some amount of work experience to be able to learn how to do that effectively.
100%. Being able to scope projects properly is definitely, I think, what ends up separating you a lot and becoming a more senior person within a team, for sure. It's like if you're the person who can understand what's the most valuable thing to work on, at that point in time, people will always gear towards you, and if you get it right enough times, that builds a lot of trust. You just need to be able to, I guess, have the chance to get it right enough times. That's the hard part. But I think a lot of people are still working towards, and it's like, how do they get their first chance to make that happen? So I know we covered a lot here. Is there anything else that you want to let the people watching this video know about how to break into engineering technical writing and succeed on the job?
Just being curious, willing to take on new things. So like technology moves quickly. So, being able to keep up with the newest stuff out there and, even kind of keeping an eye on who your competitors are, like what are they doing? Maybe there's interesting things to learn. Yeah, that's mostly what I have.
Yeah, I think that's, going to be more important is actually like being interested and just staying up to date with the terminology and like what's happening in your industry. If you can't do that, then it's like, should you be applying to that company? I'm a big believer that if you can't get involved in the product from a curiosity point of view, like you mentioned earlier, that it's very difficult to succeed. You have to have that curious mindset, and you can see it on people. That's one of the cool things. It's like, is this person like actually interested in this product, or are they just like here to be here? And that energy, when you're actually interested, it will take you very, very far. Yeah, it's not something that.
Being able to speak the language and ask questions, and it goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you everybody for watching the video. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below the video too. And we'll go ahead and rock and roll from here.
All right. Thank you for having me.